guys, this is Tommy, Tommy Nation Politics.
Come to the United
How's
States
everyone
when a
doing
woman
today?
happens to be 8 or 9 months pregnant and come here to give birth so the baby has American citizenship. That is an abuse of our laws. And so I have long supported ending birthright citizenship. In fact, I filed legislation in the Senate to end birthright citizenship. And that's what President Trump is trying to do as well.
It's very hard if you're listening to oral arguments before the court to interpret which way maybe judges are thinking or justices are thinking. A lot of people try to analyze based on their questions. What was your
for retirement or survivor benefits from the Social Security Administration, SSA, must now use online or in-person methods. The change may require nearly 6 million seniors to travel up to 45 miles, raising concerns about access to vital services. Advocates for seniors and individuals with disabilities worry that the new policy creates unnecessary barriers. The revised policy affects all phone applications, including updates to direct deposit accounts. Telephone claims will now include anti-fraud checks for high-risk indicators. Despite the changes, the SSA maintains that telephone services remain available for Medicare, disability, and supplemental income applications. An SSA spokesperson stated, beginning on April 14th, Social Security will perform an anti-fraud check on all claims filed over the telephone and flag claims that have fraud risk indicators. The spokesperson added, "We will continue to conduct 100% ID proofing for all in-person claims." For 0.5 million telephone claims a year and 70K may be flagged. Advocates argued that the shift creates challenges, especially for seniors in rural areas. Center on Budget and Policy Priorities Director of Social Security and Disability Policy Kathleen Romig said, "There's no way to schedule an appointment online." Romig added, "So you have to call the agency's 800 number. Right now, the wait for a call back from Social Security is 2.5 hours. And that's if you get through to an agent at all. Most people don't. Many seniors and individuals with disabilities also struggle with internet access or the skills needed to navigate online systems. Some fear the policy disproportionately affects bereaved individuals applying for survivor benefits, as no online application system exists for these cases.
Policy. And it's right now current U.S. law before the Trump executive order that if an illegal alien is here and she gives birth to a child, that baby is instantaneously a U.S. citizen. The problem is that's an incredible magnet for illegal immigration. You see people crossing the southern border. You see pregnant women crossing the southern border explicitly to give birth in America so their baby can be an American citizen. We also have this phenomenon called birth tourism, where you have people from foreign countries, people from China, come to the United States when a woman happens to be 8 or 9 months pregnant and come here to give birth so the baby has American citizenship. That is an abuse of our laws. And so I have long supported ending birthright citizenship. In fact, I filed legislation in the Senate to end birthright citizenship. And that's what President Trump is trying to do as well. Make clear in this case that nationwide injunctions are being abused against the Trump administration, and we'll rein it in. If we get a ruling like that, that will be a huge, huge victory to stop the latest iteration of lawfare that's being waged against the president. The second big issue is the substantive issue of birthright citizenship. As I said, in a policy matter, I think it's a slam dunk that ending birthright citizenship makes sense. It's common sense.
The Democratic Republican Party. Free states or slave states. That was their first compromise in 1850.
Warning. You are about to enter a
Hey guys, this
free-thinking,
is Tommy,
innovative,
Tommy Nation Politics.
open-minded
How's everyone doing
environment.
today?
Free thought is an epistemological
Be
viewpoint
advised.
that holds that belief should not be formed on the basis of religion, dogma, ideology, or superstition. They should instead be formed on the basis of logic, reason, empirical data. Are you someone who doesn't bend to the will of the conventional wisdom? Someone who rebels, who questions authority, who doesn't just go along with the bandwagon mentality, the conventional wisdom, and the social norms? If so, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. We're a free-thinking, new, independent, progressive media,
This
and we're asking you to
is
join
the
us.
Tommy Nation Politics.
And so you have this happening while, meanwhile, inside the United States, you have homeless veterans, you have a housing crisis,
Hey guys, this is Tommy,
you have a
Tommy
healthcare
Nation
crisis, You have 50 other crises.
Why are some
but
Israelis
the focus
pushing
needs
the
to be
idea of
on
conquering
sending
more
bombs
foreign
over to
land?
Israel so
You may
they
have seen
can
this
continue
video
this
of
war
Israeli
with
soldiers
this paramilitary
raising
organization
Israeli
that's been
flag
going on
over
for
the
years.
Lebanese village of
Like, I'm
Meron
sorry,
al-Ras
but as an
the
American
army
citizen,
expands its incursion
in
the
terms of
country.
the hierarchy
Or
of
maybe
priorities,
this touching father and
homeless
son
veterans are
moment
hired.
caught your attention.
Poor kids not eating food are higher than sending bombs to Israel.
בוקר אחד, בדרכו לגן, הצביע אלון על הערים ושאל את אבא, מה הערים האלו?
I do.
אלו הרי לבנון. אי אפשר, זה מסוכן, האויב נמצא שם.
That's the book, Alon and Lebanon, published by an Israeli organization that wants to build settlements in Lebanon, because it seems the war in Lebanon has boosted the hopes of Israelis with new settlement ambitions. One organization's already come up with a proposal, and they've changed the names of these Lebanese villages to Hebrew ones. You see, there's an even bigger picture here. The idea of Greater Israel. That's the claim that God promised the, quote, children of Israel, not only Israel, but the West Bank, Gaza, all of Lebanon, all of Jordan, most of Syria, parts of Iraq, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and even a tiny bit of Turkey. It's often dismissed as a fringe fantasy. But is it? In September, the Jerusalem Post published and then removed this editorial piece entitled, "Is Lebanon part of Israel's promised territory?" It caused quite a stir because the author spells out the religious reasons why these territories really belong to Israel. It goes even further, arguing biblical texts command Jewish people to conquer these territories to fulfill this historic promise. Again, fringe fantasy? Well, not really. While the concept has religious origins, the politics originate from Zionism and the European project at the turn of the 20th century to help Jewish people migrate to what was then historic Palestine. Some in the Zionist movement envisioned the lands under the British mandate would be part of a new Jewish state. But another mainstream Zionist idea was that other areas should become Israel, including historic Palestine and Transjordan. Look familiar? It might do, because that's the map on this podium, where Israel's finance minister and chief settler, Bezalel Smotrich, is speaking. He's repeatedly raised the Greater Israel plan.
אני רוצה מדינה יהודית. שזה אומר מה? מדינה יהודית. זה נורא נורא מורכב. זו מדינה שמתנהגת לפי עולם הערכים של העם היהודי. הריבונות של ישראל מתחילה בים ונגמרת בנהר. בשלב הזה, או שבעצם אנחנו גם יוצאים מעבר הירדן? בשלב הבא. בסדר, לאט לאט. כתוב בחז"ל שעתידה ישראל, עתידה ירושלים, להתרחב עד דמשק. רק ירושלים, עד דמשק.
Now, Smotrich is often dismissed as a radical, but building settlements is a key part of this Greater Israel plan, and it's actually the law. In 2018, the Israeli Knesset passed what's known as the Nation-State of the Jewish People Law, enshrining the development of Jewish settlements as a national value. It also defined Israel as an exclusively Jewish state where only Jewish people have the right to statehood. And as we've seen, this settler project has been successful. Israel now controls or occupies about 82% of the West Bank, where most of this occupation energy is focused. And did you know the Greater Israel map is also one of the symbols of the Herut movement? That was an Israeli political party that merged with Likud in 1988. You know Likud, the conservative party that's dominated Israeli politics for the past 5 decades and is headed by Benjamin Netanyahu. And again, it's not like Israel taking over territory is all that wild. In 1967, Israel doubled its territory after the Six-Day War, and although it was forced to give back parts of the Sinai to Egypt, it still occupies the Syrian Golan Heights and the West Bank.
About 10 days
Then,
after
in 1982, Israel invaded southern Lebanon and occupied it for 18 years.
Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz,
Israel
I went
used to
downstairs
also have
just to say hello to some
21
of the people on
settlements
Joint
in
Staff
Gaza
who used
until
to
they were
work for me. One of
dismantled
the
in
generals called me and he said, "Sir, you
2005. But the war there has reinvigorated Israelis who want to go back. There are even people trying to sell real estate there, establishing Greater Israel a bit at a time, or even reoccupying parts of countries like Lebanon. Might sound a bit far-fetched. But as the war on Gaza has shown, just about anything is possible when the world looks away.
So I said, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him.
Why
a
are
few
some
weeks
Israelis
later,
pushing the idea of
by that time we
conquering
were bombing in
more foreign
Afghanistan. I said, are we
land?
still going to war
You may
with
have seen
Iraq?
this
And he said,
video
oh, it's worse
of
than
Israeli
that.
soldiers
He said,
raising the Israeli flag over the Lebanese village of Marana Ras as the army expands its incursion in the country.
This is a memo that
Or
describes how we're
maybe
going to
this
take out
touching
7
father and son
countries
moment caught your
in 5
attention.
years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, remember that? And he said, sorry, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you.
I'm sorry, what did you say
That's
his
the
name
book,
was?
Alon and Lebanon, published by an Israeli organization that wants to build
So go through the
settlements in
countries
Lebanon.
again.
Because it seems the war in
starting with
Lebanon
Iraq,
has
Syria,
boosted
and
the
Lebanon,
hopes of
then
Israelis
Libya,
with
then
new
Somalia, and
settlement
Sudan, and
ambitions.
Iran.
One organization's
So
already
when
come up with a
you look
proposal,
at Iran,
and
you
they've
say
changed
it's
the
a
names of
replay. It's
these
not exactly
Lebanese
a
villages
replay, but
to Hebrew ones.
here's the truth.
You see, there's
That
an even
Iran from the
bigger
beginning
picture
has
here.
seen that the
the
presence
idea
of the United States in Iraq was a
Greater
threat.
Israel. That's the claim
Bless
that God
because we
promised
took out
the,
Saddam
quote,
Hussein
children
and
of
the
Israel,
Baathists.
not
They couldn't
only
handle
Israel,
it.
but the West Bank, Gaza, all of Lebanon, all of Jordan, most of Syria, parts of Iraq, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and even a tiny bit of Turkey.
They got engaged.
It's often dismissed as a fringe fantasy.
During
But
the
is it?
war with Iraq.
In September, the Jerusalem Post published and then removed this editorial piece entitled, Is Lebanon Part of Israel's Promised Territory?
Deeply involved inside Iraq. They tolerated our attacks on the Baathists. They were happy we captured Saddam Hussein, but they're building up their own network of influence, and to cement it, they occasionally give some military assistance and training and advice, either directly or indirectly, to both the insurgents and to the militias. And in that sense, it's not exactly parallel, because there has been, I believe, continuous Iranian engagement. Some of it legitimate, some of it illegitimate. I mean, you can hardly fault Iran because they're offering to do eye operations for Iraqis who need medical attention. That's not an offense that you can go to war over, perhaps, but it is an effort to gain influence. And the administration has stubbornly refused to talk with Iran about their perception, in part because they don't want to pay the price with their our U.S. domestic political base, the right-wing base, but also because they don't want to legitimate a government that they've been trying to overthrow. If you were Iran, you'd probably believe that you were mostly already at war with the United States anyway, since we've asserted that their government needs regime change. So, and we've asked Congress to appropriate $75 million to do it, and we are supporting terrorist groups, apparently, who are infiltrating and blowing up things inside Iran. And if we're not doing it, let's put it this way, we're probably cognizant of it and encouraging it. So it's not surprising that we're moving to a point of confrontation and crisis with Iran. My point on this is not that the Iranians are good guys, they're not, but that you shouldn't use force except as a last resort. There is a military option, but it's a bad one.
I wanted to get your response to Seymour Hersh's piece in The New Yorker to 2 key points this week. Reporting the Pentagon's established a special planning group within the Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan a bombing attack on Iran. That This is coming as the Bush administration and Saudi Arabia are pumping money for covert operations into many areas of the Middle East, including Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, in an effort to strengthen Saudi-supported Sunni Islam groups and weaken Iranian-backed Shias. Some of the covert money has been given to jihadist groups in Lebanon with ties to al-Qaeda. Fighting the Shias by funding with Prince Bandar and then with U.S. money not approved by Congress, funding the Sunnis connected to al-Qaeda.
Well, I don't have any direct information to confirm it or deny it. It's certainly plausible. The Saudis have taken a more active role. You know, the Saudis...
You were just in Saudi Arabia. You just came back from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, the Saudis have basically recognized that they have an enormous stake in the outcome in Iraq, and they don't particularly trust the judgment of the United States in this area. We haven't exactly proved our competence.
It caused quite a stir, because the author spells out the religious reasons why these territories really belong to Israel.
One of the reasons
it goes even further, arguing biblical text command Jewish people to conquer these territories to fulfill this historic promise. Again, fringe fantasy? Well,
yeah,
not really. While the concept has religious origins, the politics originate from Zionism and the European project at the turn of the 20th century to help Jewish people migrate to what was then historic Palestine. Some in the Zionist movement envisioned the lands under the British mandate would be part of a new Jewish state.
Maybe some sniping. You can fly helicopters over, do your air cover. You probably get safely out of there. But when you leave, the Saudis have got to find someone to fight the Shias. Who are they going to find? Al-Qaeda. Because the groups of Sunnis who would be extremists and willing to fight would probably be the groups connected to Al-Qaeda. So one of the weird inconsistencies in this is that were we to get out early, we'd be intensifying the threat against us of a super powerful Sunni extremist group, which was now legitimated by overt Saudi funding in an effort to hang on to a toehold inside Iraq and block Iraq.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics.
Hey guys, how's it going? Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. Today we're going to talk about economy, deregulation, and progressive power. Kicking it off, a little bit about Project 2025 and the corporate takeover that we have in our government. It's really shining a light on exactly how lost we are in the spaces of the right-wing corporate agenda.
When we talk about Project 2025, much of the focus lands on its threats to democracy, rights, or the expansion of executive power. But quietly embedded within the Heritage Foundation's plan is an equally transformative agenda, a radical reorganization of the American economy. Pillar 4 is not just about deregulation, it's about dismantling the government's role as a public steward and handing the levers of economic control to private interests. This is not Reagan style small government. It's not even Trump's tax cut populism. What's outlined in the Project 2025 economic vision is something far more sweeping, a systemic privatization of public functions, the erasure of regulatory protections, and the institutionalization of corporate preference as federal policy. The authors of Project 2025 frame their economic ambitions as a return to constitutional government and market freedom. But the actual proposals read like a corporate wish list. Environmental protections, to be gutted. Consumer safeguards, labeled administrative tyranny. Labor standards, considered burdensome overreach. In the policy papers, regulations are not tools to protect health, safety, or fairness. They are portrayed as existential threats to liberty. The Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Labor, and even financial oversight bodies like the SEC are depicted as enemies of American prosperity. In short, if it curbs profit, it must be eliminated. One of the central tenets of Pillar 4 is the idea that the federal government should no longer directly provide services. From education to infrastructure to healthcare-related functions, Project 2025 envisions a federal apparatus that outsources wherever possible, not for efficiency, but as a matter of principle. Consider the plan to drastically expand school choice and charter schools, often privately run, while cutting Department of Education oversight. Or the push to replace public transportation investments with private sector initiatives. Or efforts to defund federal climate programs and hand climate policy over to market-driven innovation, a phrase often used to justify inaction. This is not a vision of lean government. It's a vision of absent government, where regulation and oversight are replaced by the invisible hand, and where the hand belongs to the most powerful corporate players. In one of the more ironic twists, Project 2025 rails against woke capitalism, accusing major companies of pushing progressive values on issues like ESG, diversity, and climate disclosure. Yet at the same time, the plan champions corporate freedom to pursue profit with minimal interference. The contradiction is striking. The authors want companies to be free, unless they choose to support progressive causes. The plan even recommends government action against ESG investing, effectively using state power to punish certain private sector decisions. This is not classical economic liberalism. It is ideological enforcement, picking economic winners and losers based on political loyalty. The transformation isn't only administrative. Project 2025 also calls for a legal strategy to cement its economic vision. This includes filling federal courts with judges hostile to regulatory enforcement, redefining the Chevron doctrine, which gives agencies leeway in interpreting laws, expanding legal protections for businesses to sue regulators. In short, the courts would be weaponized to prevent future administrations from reinstating protections. Deregulation would not be a policy choice. It would be a legal straitjacket. The role of government in the economy has never been perfect, but it has been essential. Protecting consumers from predatory lending, safeguarding air and water, ensuring worker safety, and preserving competitive markets. Project 2025 seeks to undo that legacy. It envisions an America where agencies are defunded or dismantled, corporate consolidation is unchecked, social protections are weakened, the economic playing field is tilted ever further toward wealth and power, and all of this is being justified not on practical grounds, but on the ideological belief that any limit on private profit is tyranny. Pillar 4 of Project 2025 is a masterclass in euphemism, hiding massive transfers of power behind phrases like freedom, efficiency, and constitutional principles. But the reality is clear. This is not economic reform. It is economic surrender, not to markets, but to monopolies, not to liberty, but to lobbying. The fight for democracy is not just a fight over elections or civil rights. It is also a fight over who gets to shape the economy, and whether our government works for the people or only for the powerful. Thanks for watching. Stay stronger, stay smarter, stay informed. Like and subscribe for more information and updates.
Super de-duper, guys. Chat's open, by the way. So, here we are. I know it's not Tuesday, guys, but this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. Tommy Nation Politics podcast, where we just don't talk about the system. We tear it apart, and we rebuild it. Time for the system to be rebuilt, guys. We're diving headfirst into the chaos that is American politics in 2025. From the streets to DC, to Ukraine, the battlefields of other countries where we have established our hegemony. The establishment wants you to believe that they've got it under control. Spoiler alert, they don't. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Trump's back, And he's not playing nice. His tariffs are not tanking the economy as much as the Democrats would want. But his foreign policy is a circus. And his cronies are dismantling everything from the EPA to the NLRB. Meanwhile, the Democrats are scrambling, but let's be real, they're not fighting back hard. They kind of don't have a face to their platform or to their party. Homelessness is spiking, healthcare is crumbling, and a climate crisis that's about to boil us alive is on the rise. And what's the response? More half measures? More empty promises? But here's the kicker. The progressive movement is also rising. We have an opportunity as the left to take from the ashes and the mess, take something and make it reborn like a phoenix. So we're breaking it all down. The wins, the losses, the battles. We can't afford to lose. And who better to help us make sense of this than you guys? People that are free-thinking, innovative, and totally open-minded. The chat is open today. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you get involved, guys. But let's start at the beginning, which is, of course, the big, beautiful bill that might give extensions to Trump's tax cuts, might cut Medicare and Social Security, and might be part of the fourth pillar of the Project 2025.
All right, our monitors take us to Capitol Hill because lawmakers, they'll be back in that building tomorrow, right? Following a Memorial Day recess. Senators are gearing up this week to take up the president's one big, beautiful bill. The plan is to get it to his desk by July 4th. The president has one message for those lawmakers ahead of that. Let's listen.
Well, I want the Senate and the senators to change, to make the changes they want, and we'll go back to the House and we'll see if we can get them. In some cases, those changes maybe are something I'd agree with, to be honest. It happens. But we've had a very good response from the Senate, and I don't know how Democrats can't vote for it. If they don't vote for it, they're talking about a 68% tax increase. Remember that. If the Democrats don't vote, it's a 68% tax increase, which is ridiculous. And one of the things that's being covered indirectly is the fact that we'll be lowering the cost of drugs from 50 to 85% under Trump. And it's going to have indirectly something to do, not directly, but indirectly something to do with the bill, the one big, beautiful bill. And it is a big, beautiful bill. And so I think the Senate is going to get there. I hope they're going to get there.
So let's talk about that bill as it stands right now. At the center of the legislation, tax cuts and extensions. It includes no taxes on tips for workers in the service industry like restaurants and bars, and for individuals who work in the beauty industry. It also includes no taxes on overtime. Both of these extensions will not expire until the end of 2028. And then there's this. Tax deductions on up to $10,000 in interest on auto loans for cars assembled here in the United States. This provision would be in place until 2029. And finally, the legislation is set to also eliminate a long-standing $200 tax on gun silencers. That's been on the books now for over 90 years. The bill also creates a $1,000 savings account for children named Trump accounts. Under this plan, the federal government would contribute $1,000 to the accounts of children born between 2024 and 2028. All right, let's bring in Anne Margaret Carrozza, an asset protection attorney and former New York State Assemblywoman. And thank you so much for joining us. Let's start there. Parents would be able to contribute $5,000 a year to the funds, and it could be for higher education, job training, and even purchasing a first home once that child turns 18, of course. So would this be a positive thing for these students and their parents?
Well, it's definitely going to be a positive thing for the youngster, right? So monies are being contributed into these accounts and they're growing tax deferred. And when the child, upon reaching adulthood, pulls money out for approved expenses, such as purchasing a house, starting a business, higher education, the monies do not come out tax-free, as we see with the 529 savings accounts, but they do come out at the lower capital gains tax rate as opposed to ordinary income tax. So it's certainly going to be a boost for these youngsters once they reach adulthood. It will not, however, necessarily help the family in the here and now pay for diapers and car seats and formula.
Right. It's just a way to save money in the long term. I want to ask you about the other tax cuts mentioned, like the no tax on tips and overtime. Economists, they've had mixed reactions to this measure. So we want to know your thoughts about the possibility of restaurant workers or even hairstylists not being taxed for their tips. Would something like this truly help them?
Well, I think the overwhelming majority of Americans support the notion of doing away with tax on tips for service workers. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that the average service worker who receives tips will see a savings of $1,700 per year. That's definitely a good thing for those folks. But an estimated 40% of people who earn tips do not file taxes. So the way that this no tax works is that it's a deduction on your federal tax return. So for the 40% of tip earners who don't file federal taxes because their overall income is too low, they will not see the benefit of this.
Ah, that's some very, very important context there I didn't think about. Okay. And Margaret Carrozza, thank you so much for.
Cool beans, guys. A friend of mine once told me that you can't really control other people. You can only control how you respond to things. Here's how Joe Biden responds to the most vulnerable Social Security cuts. This is from Newsweek, guys. Check it out. His little words, his words, the former president. Okay. Technical difficulties. What's happening? Fucking hate internet loading. Loading. Fuck it. Let's just read the article then. Oh, now you want to talk? Do it.
Talk about Social Security. One of them called a Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme? What the hell are they talking about? People earn these.
What y'all talking about?
They paid into that benefit. They rely
what the fuck y'all talking about?
And no one should take it away. Fewer than 100 days, this new administration has made done so much damage and so much destruction. It's kind of breathtaking what could happen that soon. They've taken a hatchet to the Social Security Administration, pushing just 7,000 employees, 7,000 out the door in that time, including the most seasoned career officials. Now they're getting ready to push thousands more out the door.
They've taken a hatchet to Social Security. So yeah, guys.
At Capital One, we start with.
Oh yeah, there's Joe Biden's sponsors, Capital One. Seniors in states like Oregon, New Hampshire, and Vermont are among the most vulnerable to Social Security cuts in the country, according to research from the Retirement Living. The report, which identifies the top states where retirees rely most heavily on the benefit for basic living expenses, comes amid sweeping changes to the Social Security Administration under the Trump administration. Newsweek reached out to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, for comment. The changes came as part of efforts by President Trump and his Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, to streamline government spending. However, critics argue that the cuts could delay or interrupt benefits for vulnerable retirees. Played at the beginning, guys, that's actually started to happen already. These delays have been happening. These, it takes forever to get on the line with a representative because the employees have been cut, 700 employees cut from the Social Security office, and retirees that rely mostly on Social Security are getting checks that are delayed or no checks at all. In the midst of that, we have the big, beautiful bill at work, which has apparently no tax on tips. I haven't read the full measure of the bill yet, just to be honest with you guys, because the bill is in the process of going to the Senate now, and the Senate's going to put their own kind of tax on the bill, and then it's going to go back to the House so that they can make sure that this is the bill that they want to send to the President of the United States. So it goes a little bit kind of like a 180, and then like it goes back to the House for appropriations and things like that. As you guys know, the Congress is the power of the purse, and so they have to make sure that they appropriate all funds appropriately, vis-a-vis concordantly, appropriately. By the time it gets back to the president's desk for the signing, though, we will have the bill in place, and the president will sign it. Will the bill have Social Security and Medicare cuts? Another thing that I want to ask, and I definitely want to ask people that support Trump is, will you support Donald Trump if he cuts your Social Security and Medicare? As you probably noticed, the tax cuts from his 2017 tax laws, they were not permanent. They were acts, but he wants to, in this bill, make the tax cuts permanent in 2026, which very much benefits the 1%, and that is not the people who make $400,000 or above, like people have been telling me. It's the people that make $914,900 and above. That is the 1% that will be most benefited by the tax cuts made permanent in 2026. And the people that are not going to be benefited the least, of course, are the poor. And already homelessness, already income inequality, already our life expectancy is waning. And the Republicans and Democrats seem to be on the same page only when it comes to benefiting the 1% that own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. This is a conundrum, guys, that if y'all saw my video, Bernie would have won. We could have already solved this problem if the Democratic Party allowed people in the Democratic Party to vote for the living wage, to vote for income inequality, to a massive redistribution of wealth on the opposite side, because there has been a massive redistribution of wealth already. So what I'm trying to get the right wing to understand is there has already been socialism, just not socialism for us, but socialism for the rich. Socialism has already been happening, guys, just not socialism for us. Martin Luther King called it socialism for the rich. So we've got that going on, guys. And there's only, to every bit of idea and speech in this country, there should not be censorship. There should not be misinformation, tumultuous turmoil or snowflake safe spaces. There should be more speech. And the speech that we should be having as progressives, as a left, is opposing the ideas of tariffs and tax cuts for the rich with our ideas of raising wages, healthcare for all, and a new deal that will help all Americans have a government that works for all of us and not the few. These are the things that I'm not hearing, guys. I'm hearing so much, how do we de-radicalize the Trump supporters? How do we make them see that they should turn against Donald Trump? Well, let me tell you guys, calling them all Russian bots, telling them that they're full of misinformation, not working. Calling them Russian assets, definitely not working. Y'all should have learned that lesson by Hillary Clinton. The only thing that does work, guys, the only thing that would work is to take that speech and add your speech to it, a better idea, a new deal, a better plan, instead of the big, beautiful bill How about a bill that works for all of us and not the 1%? But alas, guys, we're still dropping off military and interventionist bombs to Israel and to Gaza. And we're still helping the 1% that own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. And with the lack of speech of progressives and progressive power and influence, the Supreme Court has no choice but to, pretty much acquiesce to whatever Donald Trump is asking. Not only are they doing it, but the Democrats are also acquiescing to Donald Trump's agenda. Here's something in California that you might find familiar in the Donald Trump and Republican policies of the national stage.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is once again sparking 2028 presidential speculation and could be trying to clean up his image by distancing himself from the far left. Newsom is rolling out a series of new policies and proposals. He's escalating a crackdown on homeless encampments by asking cities to ban the tent camps. The governor is providing blueprint legislation to dismantle the tents that line streets, parks, and waterways all over California.
Meanwhile, he's also proposing scaling back health care for illegal immigrants in his home state. The move comes as California is facing a $12 billion deficit that Newsom hopes to close by freezing the health care. Author Rob Henderson says on X, people are saying Newsom is only doing this now after years of needless suffering because he's running for president, as if he comes across as some kind of sociopath and not a genuinely good guy.
Others are calling Newsom out. San Francisco Chronicle columnist Emily Hoven writes, Gavin Newsom's new homeless encampment plan is cheap PR, a way to get his name in headlines and blame local governments for failing to address homelessness.
I think it's pretty obvious this is a political play. This is not Gavin Newsom suddenly discovering that the homeless tents are bad and people don't like them and we shouldn't let drug-addicted people be laying over the street dying of overdoses. He obviously saw the cultural backlash to the Democrats in November and is thinking, okay, how can I differentiate myself from the DNC industrial complex?
Yep. Look, context matters, right? So, in a vacuum, I'd still agree with you, but I think it would be slightly more defensible. But what has Gavin Newsom done since Donald Trump won? He has said, you know what, I'm going to start a podcast, and I'm going to have on people like Steve Bannon. I'm going to talk about the people with whom I disagree. He has said he thinks trans boys playing girls' sports is wrong and the party needs to move away from that. This is all of a piece, right? To your point. Gavin Newsom clearly looked at the election and said, okay, we lost for a bunch of reasons, but the main reason we lost is Kamala is for they, them, Donald Trump is for us, right? We are losing the culture war, and if we can't at least fight the culture war to sort of a tie, we can't talk to people about the economy or immigration or innovation or whatever. And so I think that's his bet. To be honest, from a purely political standpoint, I don't think he's wrong. Yes, it's transparent. Breaking news, politicians do things that they think are going to help them get elected, right? But I think it is actually an interesting theory of the 2028 case because to me, these Democrats were like, everything's fine. Kamala Harris almost won. I'm like, you lost the White House to Donald Trump. He won all 7 swing states. He won 312 electoral votes. He won the popular vote. Republicans have the majority in the House, the Senate. They have a majority of governorships in this country, and they control a majority of state legislatures. If you look at that and you say, I think everything looks good if you're not the Republican Party. So it's I understand why people are critical of him, and I think rightly so. At the same time, these people in the Democratic Party, like Ken Martin, the DNC chair, who's we just have to do the same thing but get better on message, whatever that means.
Right, yeah. Keep the policies, but just talk them up better.
Not to be the case.
I agree.
Right? So I think I think he is trying to carve out a 2028 lane. Look, he's breaking news. He's running, barring something crazy happening. And, I'm interested.
So Gavin Newsom wants to separate himself from the far left, whatever that means. Write in the chat, guys. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys think that the Democrats should go more right or wing? You think they should take care of homeless encampments, by just, how are they going to plan on doing that? Deporting all of the homeless to El Salvador? It's very interesting, guys. You can't control what happens. You can only control how you respond to it. And some of the things that the Democrats and especially progressives need to focus on now and in the near future are economy, economic principles, leftist economic principles, and preventing Trump, of course, from wrecking our government. These are probably the two most important things. Is the culture war an important thing? I'm not sure, guys. I'm not sure how the culture war ever really was important. But remaking the Democratic Party, both structurally and politically, has been something that's tried time and again. Repositioning ourselves and the GOP, building support for working class movements, grassroots movements. Progressives used to play the long game. We used to be able to play the long game anyway, until we aligned ourselves with a Democratic Party that doesn't find us at all helpful, important, relevant. They find us a threat. They find us an enemy. And I welcome the hatred of the Democratic Party personally. Domination politics does. Free thinking, innovative, open-minded. Fuck the Democrats and Republicans, guys. There's only one thing that we need to do, and that's promote the general welfare. Oh, also secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Speaking of Trump's agenda, these are some things that are going on in the Supreme Court that I want you all to be aware of. And also, guys, let me know your comments on exactly what do you think about these things.
The U.S. Supreme Court has made a decision in an Oklahoma case that would have allowed taxpayer dollars to fund a religious charter school.
It was a tie vote, which means a lower court's decision to block St. Isidore of Seville Virtual School will stand. News 4's Mecca Thompson is live at the State Department of Education, where the state superintendent just wrapped up a news conference. Mecca?
Yeah, Heather, Kevin, State Superintendent Ryan Walters said Oklahoma is the leader in school choice and religious freedom, describing today's hearing as a disappointment.
I think it's remarkable. It's a great win for Oklahoma.
We were disappointed.
A split decision by the United States Supreme Court in St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School and the Oklahoma Charter School Board versus Oklahoma Attorney General Gentner Drummond.
It's really important to me that the government not interfere in my pursuit of faith or in instilling those values in my children.
Erin Brewer, an Oklahoma parent and plaintiff against the religious charter school, weighing in.
We had to stand up as parents and for our kids and our schools and just say, this is not American. This is not the way we understand democracy.
Only 8 Supreme Court justices decided the case since Justice Amy Coney Barrett recused herself. A split vote means the Oklahoma Supreme Court's ruling not allowing the opening of the virtual Catholic charter school remains in place.
We weren't showing favoritism towards or prejudice against St. Isidore, and we don't think any school should be excluded simply because of their religious faith.
I'm relieved that we continue to have freedom of religion in the United States, and that every family can choose when to worship, with whom to worship, and how to worship.
Others reacting to the decision, including State Superintendent Ryan Walters.
Looking at a potential amendment to the state constitution to help clarify this issue. And we're also looking
over time and fractured into the Democrats and Republicans we know today. But the split was less a rupture than a branching. Both parties inherited the same philosophical roots, oscillating between government intervention and personal freedom, states' rights and federal authority. Jefferson's writings on liberty echo in today's civil rights debates, just as the early party's economic individualism reverberates through Republican tax cuts, of course. These opposites and ideologies, these things are illusions. The continuity extends towards policy, where the illusion becomes starkly apparent. Take the tension between federal power and states' rights, a debate that has shaped issues from healthcare to environmental regulation for centuries. Both parties wrestle with the same dilemmas, often arriving at solutions that favor entrenched interests over public good. the Democratic Republicans' early resistance to the Federalist elitism, it morphed into today's critiques of the lobbying, wealthy donor, special interest debacle we have that Citizens United gave us, and that Wall Street is continuously taking advantage of, as well as the military-industrial complex and other foreign actors. As the partisans rebrand, as the system prioritizes power over people, the rhetoric of division only deepens the deception. Turn on any news channel, and you'll see Democrats and Republicans trading barbs, each painting the other as an apocalypse's harbinger. This theatrical fraud show is absolutely boring.
Who is the next generation of the Democratic Party? Semaphore is reporting that at least a half dozen senators are now viewed as potential 2028 candidates by their colleagues and top Democrats on Capitol Hill. It's a lot of folks. Semaphore is calling it a potential presidential primary dogpile in 2028. Joining us now, Phil Bump and Peter Baker, who are still with us. All right, so Phil, let's talk about the field and what the field might need to consider. You've got some polling on what costs the Democrats in 2024. Lay it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way you framed it as being the next generation, I think is really important. One of the things that we saw in 2024 is we saw this decline in support for the Democratic candidate among younger voters in particular. Part of that, I think, is just that younger voters don't recognize the exception that Donald Trump is within our political system. But part of it is just that the Democrats have actually lost ground, particularly among young men and particularly young men of color. We've also seen polling that suggests that there's been sort of some reversion, that some of that support for Trump has probably been fallen back over the course of the first couple months of his presidency. So we're sort of in uncertain territory, but the Democratic Party has for a long time now been more subject to the whims of young people because young people are more likely to vote for Democrats than they are for Republicans. And so the Democratic Party has to be very attentive to this. And so I think that a candidate who is able to effectively argue to young people that they are the vision, that they are the way forward for the country, I think that person's probably going to have more luck as a general election candidate. The question, of course, is, are those young people going to vote in the primary and therefore help get that person on the ticket in the first place?
I think that's a really good point that you made at the top, which is that for younger voters, Donald Trump is not an anomaly. He's not a disruptor of the status quo. He is the status quo. Donald Trump-style politics is what they've always known. And understanding that and then reacting to the world that we live in today, not the world that we lived in 10 years ago, 20 years ago, is important. And when you have in the Democratic Party right now, Peter, is a generation that harkens back to a very different political climate. And there have been arguments out there made and criticisms that Democratic leadership are playing by old rules that no longer apply. Peter, you're on mute.
All right. Sorry. In some ways, they are obviously playing by old rules. And it hasn't been successful for them, you can argue, because they've now lost the presidency twice to Donald Trump, once with the popular vote. And, there's an argument to be said that they need to go out there and find ways of fighting in a way that don't seem quite so decorous. That's what you hear from a lot of people who are in the party, particularly younger leaders, saying that the older members of the party who think that politics was played the way it was in the 80s or 70s or 90s, the Biden generation, that's long past. At the same time, of course, there are Democrats who will tell you need to make a contrast. They're simply becoming a leftist version of Trump doesn't stand on principle. You need to stand for something better than just we have an ideology that's just different than his. That if you are arguing that he is a threat to democracy, if you're arguing that he represents a corrosive and divisive kind of politics, then simply being corrosive and divisive from the other side, changes the argument. So the Democrats haven't figured that out yet, and they don't have an obvious leader right now. These are a number of accomplished people who are making their way up to the foreground, but it's hard to see which of them at this point is going to emerge from that group in the way that Barack Obama did in 2008 as representative of a new generation.
Yeah, let's bring in somebody from the party, former New York congressman and former DOJ staffer, Mondaire Jones. Mondaire, it's good to have you. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
The new generation of the Democratic Party, the next generation of the Democratic Party, what do they need to keep in mind?
Well, what they need to keep in mind is that we've got a whole election coming up in 2026 that is of existential importance, especially if people want to do something to rein in the excesses and the illegalities and the corruption of this current presidential administration. So we have to keep our eyes on the prize when it comes to that. And then, of course, if we're fortunate enough in this country to still have free and fair elections, a 2028 presidential election will take place. I don't think that, the so-called Biden cover-up is going to be prominent in 2028. I think there are going to be a lot of things on the minds of voters, but it is important, of course, for people to be honest about what happened in 2024.
Well, let's leave Biden out of it for a second and just focus on messaging. There's a debate within the Democratic Party whether they should lean more progressive. And there's polling numbers out today suggesting that the face of the Democratic Party by far is AOC, obviously on the progressive bent, or if they should go back and hew toward more of a middle ground. I wonder where, you've run elections, you've won elections. Yeah. Where do you stand on where the future is, what the path is?
Well, I think, first of all, that the reason AOC is so popular compared to many other figures in the Democratic Party is not because people view her to be progressive, so to speak. It's because they see her standing up to Elon Musk and Donald Trump at a time when people, not just Democrats, but independents and some disaffected Republicans alike, are saying, who the hell is going to at least try to stop these people from doing what they've been doing when it comes to tanking the economy, taking away fundamental freedoms, and so on and so forth? And you see her when she's out there talking about a message that sounds in economic populism. She's not out here using the word progressive, frankly. And a lot of members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus haven't been using that word very recently either.
So it's an ugly word now?
Look, I think it's a word, sadly, that has been co-opted by some of the more extreme members. Many of them don't even identify as Democrats and the far left of American politics. But what everyone can get behind